Morning. So today is day 37 of Bible in 90 Days, or What's in the Bible, where we're reading through the entire Bible just like a novel, page by page, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, until we get all the way to the end. So we've covered already a lot of ground all the way from Genesis, and now today we're in the book of Esther. So we're going to start the book of Esther and finish the book of Esther and start the book of Job. Now, we've already said that, so far the story of the Bible seems to be the story of how God had a relationship with a nation called Israel, or the Israelites, from, all the way from creation all the way to where they were now. Obviously, before creation, there were no Israelites. We get to hear about everything else that happened until, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, came along. So, in the last few days, we'll be looking at things like Ezra and Nehemiah, where the exiles, i.e. the Israelites who were now exiles in Babylon or Persia or whatever, were now coming back, to rebuild the walls, or to rebuild, the buildings that were in Jerusalem. Today, Esther is probably set in the same kind of time, but we don't know whether it's before Ezra or after. I'm sure if you do some research, you'll be able to find out. However, the story doesn't change as much. Where it sits really doesn't matter. So Esther chapter 1, we have a king, King Ahasuerus, whom we've heard about actually in Ezra and Nehemiah. He throws a banquet, for a very long time in the capital called Susa. So we hear that he ruled from India to Ethiopia. So that's probably the entire world, because if you imagine all the way from India all the way to Ethiopia is a really a vast place. So I don't know whether places like America were there at that time, but anyway, India to Ethiopia, which is probably the entire world. During the feast, he had a Queen Vashti, so he calls her to come and parade her beauty or whatever, but she refused, and based on some advice, Queen Vashti is demoted from being queen and banished from being in the presence of the king. We then hear that another queen is sought for King Ahasuerus. Esther chapter 2, Esther was actually the girl was that the book is based on, was one of the girls that was taken into the selection process to be the next queen. She was actually a Jew, adopted by her cousin Mordecai. We hear that she was very beautiful, and she took the heart of the king, and through this selection process she ended up being selected as the next queen. But her identity as a Jew, for whatever reason, was always kept secret. We then hear that her, cousin Mordecai uncovers a conspiracy that some people wanted to kill the king. So he told Esther. Esther then told the king. An investigation was made, and he found out that Mordecai was right. These people wanted to kill the king. So they were found, and they were killed. Then obviously that's just written in the history books. Esther chapter 3, we hear that there's a guy called Haman in the same kingdom who was promoted by the king to be the second, in charge, but he was always offended that Mordecai, would not bow before him. Maybe Mordecai, it was a relationship with God thing or whatever, but he simply would not bow, for Haman. So Haman makes a plan not only to kill Mordecai because he felt, very disrespected. He also made a plan to kill all the Jews. Haman is then given permission by the king, to actually kill all the Jews on a particular day. Esther chapter 4, Mordecai and the Jews, obviously, they weep over this pending doom that their whole entire nation was about to be wiped out. And Esther, obviously catches wind of this plan, or, what was happening. So Mordecai then asked Esther, to go to the king and ask for this not to be done, that, the Israelites shouldn't have to be killed. The Jews wouldn't have to be killed. And at that time, apparently there was a rule that nobody could simply approach the king. If you approach the king, he would have to allow you to come into his presence. Otherwise, you would be killed straight away. So Esther kind of gives this as a reason that, hey, I can't just go to, to the king and ask him not to do this because he has not even seen me for the last 30 days. That's what he says in there. But Mordecai at this point warns Esther that just because she's the queen, she was still a Jew, and she probably would not be exempt, from this killing that was, that was coming, and perhaps she was queen for such a time as this. So that's where that popular verse comes from, like, for such a time as this, to say that maybe she was actually in that position of influence because this was going to happen. So Esther at this point, she asks for everybody to fast, and she would go to the king, and if she died or whatever. So there is a change right now at this point in Esther to say, okay, whatever the rules are, I'm going to try and go to the king to get to get this planned murder stopped. So Esther 5, Esther gets an audience, and invites the king and Haman to a feast. The king makes an offer, but she requests, another audience with Haman and the king as well. Haman prepares to hang Mordecai, the following day, because obviously, remember, he was still not bowing to him, so he was just making another plan on the side to, to hang Mordecai. By chance, in Esther chapter 6, the king could not sleep, and that night, he could not sleep that night, and by chance, it turns out that they read the chronicles or the books of history, and they found that Mordecai had uncovered this conspiracy, but he had not been honored for it or rewarded for it. So as he comes in, the king asks Haman, what should we do for somebody that the king wants to honor? So at this point, Haman thinks it's about him. So he said, oh no, we should do this. We should let him ride on the mule. We should honor him in this way. And the king turns around and says, everything that you have said, make sure that you go and do that to Mordecai. So if you imagine, this is a twist in the story, that Haman was planning to murder Mordecai, but it ends up that he actually has to bless him and do all the things that he had suggested, hoping it was for him. So it's a bit of an interesting twist there. So Esther 7, Esther uncovers the Haman's plot to kill all the Jews at the second banquet, and Haman is actually hanged on the same gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. We then hear about the promotion of Mordecai in Esther chapter 8, and the writing of a new decree that would allow the Jews to defend themselves if people tried to kill them. The reason why they had to do that is because in this day and time, when a king wrote a decree, it could not be changed. It would only be able to, you'd have to find the technicality around it or loophole around it or whatever. So in this case, all they could do was say, if people try and come and kill you, you can defend yourselves. Esther chapter 9, the Jews successfully defend themselves and they preserve their life. So it's a time of joy and gladness, and it would be remembered for times to come, and it would be celebrated with a holiday actually, and gift giving, to say that their lives had been restored to them. Esther chapter 10, it just tells us that the full story of the kings was written in other books that we don't know about them. And Mordecai was the second in charge and was a really, really popular guy. So that story, I suppose, it just fits in there to say another thing that could have happened to the Jews, that they could have been murdered, but because there was this Jew girl called Esther who found favor with the king, she managed to actually get in place a plan to make sure that the Jews, were not killed. And, that's the end actually of the book of Esther. So we also do Job today. So Job chapter 1 to 7. Again, there's a bit of debate on the time, the time where the book of Job was written, or exactly what point. But I'm not too worried about exactly where it fits or whatever. As long as I can find something that I can learn, from the book, then, I'm okay with that. So Job chapter 1 to 7. We hear in Job chapter 1 that Job was a man of Uz. He was a righteous man and very wealthy. He had sons and daughters and livestock, etc. We hear that God was pleased with Job, and in one of the conversations that God has with Satan, he brought him up and said, have you seen my servant Job? He's such a nice guy. He's righteous and he does everything that pleases me. Satan then insisted that Job was like this, because of the material things that he had and the family and the protection that God was giving him. And he argued that if this was taken away from him, things would be very, very different. God then gives Satan the power to take all that Job had, and Satan goes ahead and kills all of Job's livestock, all his children. He destroys all his property. But through all this, Job does not sin against God and actually responds, naked I came from the womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave and the Lord is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So what Satan would have expected was for Job to start cursing God and to sin against God and not to continue to worship God just because all this stuff had been taken from him. But it was actually the opposite. He actually continued, to bless God. So Job did not blame God or charge him with any wrongdoing. Job chapter 2, God, because of this, is pleased with Job. But Satan said it was because he was still healthy. He said, okay, you've taken everything away from him, but the fact that he still has his health means that, he will continue to praise you. So at this point, God allows Satan again to take away Job's health and to make him ill. And we see that Job's wife responds at this point is like, oh, just curse God and die. Why do you continue to suffer like this? If you worship this God or whatever else, just curse him and, just die other than living, in all of this misery. But Job actually corrects her at this point and tells her that we should accept all things from God. If he gives us the good things, we should also accept the, the bad things. And at this point, we hear about Job's 3 friends that come to, to see him. Job chapter 3. So the entire book of Job now, from here all the way to Job 40, I think it's 42, is basically a conversation that is happening between Job and his 3 friends. So Job would say something about his situation. The friends would respond, weighing in on what they thought was the reason for Job's, situation that he had. So Job chapter 3 is the first of those conversations. So Job 1 and Job 2 is simply an introduction of what happened that causes us to then see all these conversations that happen. So it's actually important to know that the people that are speaking here are simply giving their opinion of why they think the things have gone wrong. And it's only until we get to Job 38 that we hear God's response to all of these things, because God was silent the entire time, and Job and all these friends, they did not know about Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2, i.e. the conversations that had happened, between God and Satan. So Job 3, Job curses the day of his birth. He wishes that he was dead, wishes that he was never born, because obviously he's in this predicament. Job chapter 4, one of his friends, Eliphaz, he asserts that Job is probably not innocent about something, since innocent people do not perish, because the thought at this time was, if you do the right things, God will do right things for you. So if anything bad is happening to you, it means you must have done something bad. That's essentially the theme or what's happening in Job. So that's what Eliphaz, starts with. Then says, verse 17, can mortals be righteous before God? Can human beings be pure before their maker? Job chapter 5, Eliphaz continues to say that human beings cause trouble. Job should commit to ask God, and perhaps God was simply disciplining Job for something that he had done. So Job's attitude, should change. Job chapter 6, Job responds and said he would rather die because he could not see the end of the suffering and misery that he was in. And, he's making this proclamations like, show me where I've gone wrong, because he's asserting his innocence, that I am innocent, I've not gone wrong anywhere. So God should come and tell me, what it is that I have done wrong, because obviously I am in this position because you guys are assuming that I've done something wrong. He continues again in Job 7 to say life is hard, life is short, that he would not restrain himself from the pain that he was feeling, and he would share it with his friends. He also then asks, like, why have I been targeted? Why has he been why has God been targeting Job, and why are these things happening to him? So these are the questions that Job starts to ask. So as we get into all the rest of Job, is the friends answering and Job answering back, trying to get a feel of, because they were trying to figure out why this stuff was happening to Job. So yeah, today is actually a lot of detail because we've read the entire book of Esther, and now we've started a bit of Job, but we continue on. Hopefully that's still helpful, and I will see you guys tomorrow.